Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Travel and Tourism Podcast, my first season. My guest today has quite the journey, beginning with his time at Club Med from 88 to 1991. He kicked off his first season at Club Med Playa Blanca as a Circus G.O. And after his run at Club Med, he went pro, joining the high-flying world of the Flying Farfans in Las Vegas. Fun fact, he went to high school with none other than Adam Horovitz, better known as Ad Rock from the Beastie Boys, and you can be sure I'm going to ask him about that. Originally hailing from Strong Island, later making his way to Manhattan, and now proudly calling Las Vegas home, please give a very warm welcome to Louis Schneidman. Hey, Louis, how are you, sir?
I'm doing great, man. That was a great intro. Thank you.
Thank you. I only flubbed it once. Okay. Let's start off before I forget thanking your friend Peter Gold, who told me about you after our interview ended. He said, I got a great guest if you want, Greg. And I said, sure. And sure enough, in our little pre-interview, it was so fun talking to you. So I'm glad you agreed to this and we can get your story down here today.
Awesome.
Thanks, Peter.
Yeah.
All right, sir. Like I said, we got a lot to cover, but let's start to high school because I got to know where you went to school that you were in the same school as one of the founding members of Beastie Boys.
Right. And Henry Winkler also graduated from our school, the Fonzie.
Really?
And the guy from John Boy graduated from the Waltons.
Okay. Wow.
Before
Lots
a lot
of
of people. Yeah,
a couple talent there.
Yeah, actually, quite a few more famous people went there. But anyway, yeah. So Ad Rock was 1 year younger than me, and I was, we had the cliques, the jocks, the this, the that, and whatever. I was a jock, but I was injured 1 year, and so I went and joined the theater department. I was in a play with Adam, and he and I used to hang out after school and we became friends, nothing super close or anything, but we, if I saw him today, he would be like, it would probably be like, oh yeah, I remember him, but it wasn't like, super buddies or anything, but, hip hop was a very big part of my life. And I would have loved to have known where that would have gone had I expressed that with him back then. Who knows? I could have been one of the fourth Beastie Boys. Who knows?
That's true. That's true. Since I work for a university, I'm also, interested to know that you went to NYU, but you also graduated from Tisch, New York University Tisch School of Arts, otherwise known as Tisch. Very prestigious place. Alumni from there. I'm not going to bother even mentioning the alumni. It's a who's who of Hollywood, right?
Well, I actually don't remember anybody famous while I was there because I was only there for 2 years. I did remember the first 2.5 years I did at Columbia. And when I realized there was nothing I was ever going to do with any kind of degree that I can get there in the undergraduate department, I transferred over to my passion, which was music production, video production. And I ended up also learning theater and all the arts there. I didn't really know anybody like who was famous, but I did go to a party one time and John Cusack, or whatever, however you pronounce his name, was there. And I think he was going to school there at the time. But besides that, I got no big name drops for you there.
No worries. I'm also fascinated to know that you wrestled on the same team with Peter, right?
Yes, well, Peter's 3 days older than me, July 1st, 64, and I'm July 4th, 64, and we have been super tight soul buddies since my very first day at McBurney High School where we went to, and wrestling itself was such a huge part of our lives, but specifically our coach, because we got to get trained he was way more than a wrestling coach. And so that was some very special training that we got. Peter and I have been very close and been slingshotting each other's career, especially once we went pro in the circus back and forth. And in fact, I was on the phone with him randomly. He didn't even know I was speaking with you today, 10 minutes before the call.
I also have another note here that I abbreviated. And I can't remember. So can you fill this in? I have Ford model number 1, after party at Xenon, dancing shirtless on speakers and $50. What did I write?
Yeah. So, when I would say right at the peak when it was starting to go downhill, but it was still at the peak of the whole disco era, which we're talking 1980-ish in Manhattan, the drinking age was still 18. It's funny, if you were my age, you would have been able to drink for 1 year, and then they changed it to 19, then I couldn't drink, and then I could drink again, and then they changed it to 21, and I couldn't drink, and then I could drink again, so it was like a strange time. But anyway, in 80, it was the drinking age was 18, and we were 16, 17. they weren't really checking cards back then, and we were trying to get into the nightclubs, and we just, Studio 54, Xenon, no matter what, how many times we tried, they would never let us in because it was very, chic and you had to look a certain way. One of my best friends' girlfriend had an older sister who was in the elite Ford model back in the day, and she had tickets to an after party there, and she couldn't go, so she gave them to the sister. The sister couldn't go, gave it to her boyfriend, my best friend. He couldn't go, so me and Peter, we went. There was no room to dance, so we just jumped up on a speaker, and it was hot, so we took our shirts off, and we were pretty ripped because we were, at the peak of our wrestling career. And all of a sudden, we see this this manager and some bouncers. The crowd is partying like the Red Sea, and he points his finger up to me, and Peter's like, "You, down here!" And we're like, "Oh my God, we're in so much trouble." And we go back. They take us to this back green room, and the owner of Xenon at the time, which was like the Steve Rubel of his competition, comes up to us and he gives us these three-dimensional cards and says, I want you and your friend to come here as many times as you can a week. We'll pay you $50 a night to dance on those speakers. And the owner of one of the chicest fashion clubs, apparel places in New York called Fiorucci's at the time, was there. And he says, yes, come to my shop and you can pick out any clothes you want to dance in. And that was the beginning of the male go-go dance movement, head by I can't remember his name, John Blair. Well, he was like a big night promoter, and he started the all-male go-go dance stuff, and the rest is history.
Right. And then you took these talents to Playa Blanca, which,
Oh yeah.
big singles village. I used to dance on the speakers at Playa. But I'm guessing that Peter Gold kind of got you in, right? You didn't have a formal interview, correct?
Oh no, I was totally I was the fourth person on a three-person team with the girl's name was Tihani, and then there was Stefan Cote and Peter, and they were the team. And it actually worked out great because a couple of months in, Tihani got some food poisoning, had to go home, and then it was good that I was there. But his family took him on a Club Med vacation. He fell in love with the trapeze. He was like the star of the week there. And Bob Christians at the time, I think Annie Bowman or someone else was on the team, asked him if he would stay on, and he did. And then he would go back to university, and in the summertime he would go and do the summer times. Then he'd go back to university, always going back on the breaks. And finally, when he graduated, he went and was part of, if not the first, at least the second generation of OG Circus G.Os. We're talking 84, 85, 1984, 85. And he would just keep coming back while I was in school and working and with the stories and the pictures and the VHS videos. And finally, when 30 days after getting my degree, he invited me to come down. And I was like, heck yeah. Because at the time, I had just broken up with my girlfriend. I was living in the back of a moving truck for a company that I was working for. I had money, but I mean, I just didn't, the lease was up, the girlfriend was gone, and I was in total limbo, not knowing where to go or what to do. And then Peter called me, invited me down to old Playa Blanca.
What do you remember about arriving your first day or first week with Chef de Village? Yeah.
Unbelievable, because I was overweight and out of shape and low self-esteem, even though I was a great athlete in high school. And it was the perfect thing for me. It wasn't crazy about the 4-hour trip from whatever
Puerto Vallarta.
yeah, Puerto Vallarta, going through the mountains. Got some stories about that for another call, but as far as stuff I've seen on the road. So when I pull in, I mean, it was so magical and so foreign to me. And luckily I did speak a little Spanish because I'm from Manhattan. I took Spanish in high school. I was working in the jobs that I was doing. There was a lot of Puerto Ricans, Dominicans, and Cubans. So I was decently proficient for whatever it was work down there. I get there, and I think the very first day that I'm there, I hit the first flying trapeze class for me. And I remember being up on the board, and Peter was working the board, and he like just kind of spoke into my ear. He said, remember this moment because you're going to be on my end of this equation for the rest of your career. And I want you to remember what everyone that you're going to be facilitating is feeling. And that was some of the greatest advice he ever gave me because it allowed me to be really compassionate and understanding when people were going their very first time. So he was a great teacher too.
That's
Still
very,
is.
very astute that he said that.
Yeah, yeah. Smart guy.
You were there 13 months, and I think you told me you saw about four different teams in those 13 months.
Actually, I was only in Playa Blanca for 5 months,
Oh, five.
and
Okay.
then I got transferred to Sandpiper, which was
Oh,
kind of
okay.
like Sandpiper was the headquarters for the American and I think South American, at least for circus. And I got to work with Bob Christians, and I came at a time where I saw four teams come and go because I was there for 13 months. Yeah, and this was 6 months contracts back then, so that was a long time
Was
to be at
Patrick
one
Hayes
place.
with you in
He
Playa?
absolutely was. So when I first got there, was David Asher was the official chief, and he had final say. Patrick Hayes, who was running the tennis department, but he was an equal member of that circus team. And then there was me, and that was you talk about camaraderie, chemistry, and like no one had to delegate anything. Everyone just it was the smoothest running machine circus producing engine you'd ever heard of. It was such a great team. David, Patrick, and myself, with a couple of other people from other departments that came in and really made a difference as well. And that was a very dynamic team, and I'm so grateful to have that be the first team that I where I was getting paid to be able to begin my, the next stage of my Club Med circus career.
So, do any stories or anecdotes come out of your Playa Blanca season that you'd like to share?
Playa Blanca.
I mean, I know I gave you some
There,
rules beforehand, so
yeah, I will say one of the highlights was when we had a G.O night where we all went on the scuba boat. And it was, I don't know, probably about 15 or 20 of us we fit on that boat. And we were out there, and I know it's a phenomenon. It has to do with the plankton in the water, but all of a sudden we saw this neon, or it was some sort of neon green torpedo coming right towards the boat. And it didn't take long for me to realize that it was a dolphin. And all of a sudden, we're talking hundreds of these what appeared to be computer generated neon cylinder shaped things jumping in and out of the water, following us in the boat. And it was so magical. And I'll always remember that. I'll always remember that. That was just magical. So the only word that keeps coming up for me.
wow, I've never saw any dolphins at night. That's pretty impressive.
I seem to, it's strange because I've done boating things around the world, and for some reason, they always show up when I'm on the boat, and the captain or the whoever's running the things, they're like, "That's strange. That never happens." So I don't know if I'm like the dolphin whisperer or whatever, but maybe someday I'll figure out the porpoise. Sorry, I
Okay,
had to throw that one in there.
no problem. We take dad. We accept all dad or uncle jokes here. That's no,
Great, great.
no,
I
that's
got the whole
okay.
family here.
Okay. Now, back then, was Playa Blanca still open year round, or would it close for rainy season? Do you recall?
No, it was year round. It was year round, and it was one of the hottest, like, most desirable ranking Club Med villages to the best of my recollection back then. Yeah. But it
Yeah,
wasn't shortly after that that it started declining.
I know you told me that Rene Guess, I think, was the main catcher here at Playa. So when you described yourself as having, I quote, like having a ready insight into an understanding of things. Okay.
Yes, yes, our favorite word.
Yes.
Perspicacious.
Yes. So did you wind up being a catcher or flyer or a bit of both?
So the team was really solid. They had their routine between Tihani, Renee, and Peter, and I was the fourth. I was the fifth wheel on that. But I did the comedy, of course, where the catcher keeps his knees on the. I mean, the flyer keeps his knees on the bar, and while holding the catcher, and it's a great crowd pleaser. I did fly out of lines towards the end, of my couple of months there. Back in those days, they were very respectful and cautious about taking people out of lines and progressing them too quickly, So I was definitely trained under that tutelage, that style of tutelage. But I never caught the show where it was just the GOs and the circus team flying. That was always Renee. I wasn't really experienced enough to catch at the time, like one of the greatest tricks in Club Med, the 1.5 or the double that Peter was going for. That was definitely all Renee. And I got to give it to Renee because I was about 180, Peter was about 180, and he caught our passing. He caught my legs, and that's a pretty heavy legs for him. And he was a good catcher.
I like catching
So,
tree trunks, huh?
oof, big time. Yeah.
All right. What would you like to talk about next? Would you like to move to Sandpiper? Or it's your show.
I mean, the context of these calls is how Club Med, one of the contexts that my understanding is how it changed our lives. And Sandpiper, I mean, I would say Playa was the appetizer, and Sandpiper was the main course because in Sandpiper, I was interim chief in between Patrick Hayes and David Asher. There was a couple of months there, maybe 6 months, where I was chief, kind of thrown into it fairly quickly at a young experience. And then Bobby Bates came along, and then he was the chief for the rest of my 13 months there at Sandpiper. But I would say it was the ultimate for me personally, because it doesn't work out this way for everyone. But for me personally, I couldn't have designed or imagined a better graduate school after graduating, with a Bachelor of Fine Arts from Tisch at NYU. This was the perfect thing because of the life skills and the people skills it taught me, first of, and also really, I worked with a lot of kids and I love children and I have such a profound and deep respect for where they're at in their lives and how their interactions at the ages that I was working with them are the kind of things that shape their character forever. So I was deeply in touch with that. And I always made the training for the circus shows and the actual circus shows themselves. I wanted that to be the highlight of their life, So to be able to do that every single week for 13 months straight without a day off, it was very intense and it was definitely taxing on me on all levels. But the reward of seeing them and then getting letters later on from the parents of like how little Jimmy's never been the same. He's just so full of life and esteem, and because they may have been picked on, they may have been bullied, but it changed their life. So to be a part of that, and also on the adult level, the magic that happens on the trapeze as a facilitator, to be a part of the personal transformation that was just naturally occurring without any kind of structure or any kind of like program. It was just them going up there and doing it. To see that really sent me off on a path of personal development for both me personally, but also to be involved in all kinds of programs to really help people, progress in their lives. Because I see the degree to which, and I'm sure many people have, how fear and limited thinking and limited beliefs about oneself has, diminished their lives. And to be a part of something and to learn something that I then took way past Club Med to be able to continue on that course is one of the greatest takeaways from Club Med, but also just, being able to work with coworkers of all different kinds of personality, the work ethics. People say, "Oh, it's a working vacation." And I'm like, "The heck it is." That's hard work. We're putting in, 18-hour days and there's no slacking, so the work ethics, you slack, you get sent home. So the work ethics I developed, the performance skills, the ability to improv, the ability to participate in so many different kinds of shows and productions. And it was just one big, massive training, but also incredible experience, so much fun. the relationships, just it's one of the highlights of my life for sure. And I ran with that long after leaving Club Med. Even to this day, it's a part of me.
You mentioned the grind, the hours a day. Because of the grind, one of the greatest moments in your life happened here at Sandpiper. So if you can tell our
Oh,
listeners what that was, please.
I will tell it, but it's and it could very easily be taken as like an ego moment. But if you, whoever's listening, if you could hear it from just as an observation, it goes like this. So and everybody knows this because they've all seen it happen if they finish the season. Towards the end of the season, when the teams are transitioning, it doesn't happen like one whole team comes and a whole other team leaves. It's like an overlap over a 4 week period sometimes of 10 people a week or 20 people a week leaving. And it typically goes like Chief says, oh, and this week, after they give the talk about whatever needs to be done for the week, the upcoming week, there was always the goodbyes and the departures. And since I had been there, seeing four teams come and go, me being the last team to go, it was just and Shelly from sailing, or and you get the golf clap, and just it was very informal, and there wasn't any big hoop to do about it. People would just leave and people would clap. And I never saw this coming. I was just not aware of like the high profile that I had in the village between working with the kids and being in the shows. When they called my name, I didn't know what was happening behind me because I was sitting in the front row. I turn around and like there's about 100 people and I don't know if they planned it or if they all just did it naturally, or maybe some people started doing it and everyone joined in. They all stood up on their seat and gave me a standing ovation for, it seemed like an eternity, but it was, well over a minute. And to me, it was probably because I had been there so long, which was rare back then. People usually did 6 months and changed, and they knew that I was there a long time. I feel like I made a difference there. And it's a moment that I go to whenever I feel down in life about, well, am I really making a difference? Did I really make a difference? And I remember that moment, and that applause did not come lightly. It did, and it wasn't solicited. And it just really showed me if ever I have doubt of, what I'm capable of, or, what kind of person I am, I go to that moment as an anchor to re-anchor back into my greatness. It has carried through. There's definitely been some lulls in my life, but that moment has carried through for a good part of my life. It still does. It was a great, great experience. Thank you for remembering that, because it always raises my energy whenever I think about it.
I had a similar, thing happened to me. My first season at a departure, and I never forgot it. So I'm glad that you and I still have these amazing memories to hold on to. It's
Yeah.
it gets you through sometimes too. Knowing that at one point in the life we touched someone, and we didn't know how hard we were working, but they saw that we were, right.
When you get just to underline, the profundity of what you're saying. So there was this girl that came from Germany, and this was at a time when people were coming to Club Meds. Families were choosing Club Meds because they had a circus program. And the kids knew that the creme de la creme act, especially if you were a girl, was to be the star in the double trapeze act, to be the one that was picked to perform with the Circus G.O. And this girl came from Germany, and she was phenomenal. And a couple months later, her father sends me a picture where she had cut a stick, attached some ropes to it, tied it to a tree, and she was basing her little brother. And the father sent me pictures of it. And to know that experience was that profound for her, it just like, wow, you never know. And you and I talked about this. You never know how one little gesture that you did that was just, you weren't even conscious of it, makes a forever impact on the individual that you shared it with.
Yeah, exactly. You also have another story I want to get into. I'd like to get into it now because it goes with what you just said. Basically, when you left Club Med, you were at a summer camp with Bobby Bates, right? Just as
Correct.
before you turned pro.
Yes.
And then After pro, you went to the Flying Farfans, correct?
Yes, I auditioned. They were the so Circus of the Stars had a 20-year run from like 78 to or whatever to 94. It was actually maybe more than 20 years. And so they were the flying act they were the professionals that were training the stars the year that I auditioned for them. And so yeah, I went out to LA, and it was at the Universal Studios at the time. It was actually a summer attraction. The 9 weeks that they took to train the stars was one of the attractions at Universal Studios. And so yeah, I auditioned for them there, the Flying Farfans, and that's a story in and of itself. But I know the one you're talking about. You're talking about the
Yeah.
girl at the summer camp.
Well, yeah, because so all of a sudden your Chris Angel has a your magician Chris Angel has a 10-year run at Luxor. You're working with him, right? You're his rigger. What how did you put it?
That's right. So, he was doing tricks like recreating Houdini's Times Square straitjacket escape routine, which where he gets hoisted up by his ankles, and there needs to be a system in place to do that. There's no magic there. It's just rigging. And because of the experience that I learned starting at Club Med, and then as a professional performer traveling all over the world, unlike the Cirque du Soleil stars now who have entire tech teams doing it for them, the performers on the road in the years that Peter and I were performing, and probably still today to some degree, we're doing all the rigging. So I learned all about that. And then to be a part of the installation of effects here in Las Vegas, I really took my rigging game up to a whole nother level and developed a reputation as being competent. And so when it came time to hire the crew for Chris Angel at the Luxor, where he did his 10-year run from 2008 to 2018, I was on that team. And I was one of the general riggers that was in charge, but halfway through, I became the guy that actually worked directly with him. Because if you messed up with him, he would kindly ask the lead to remove that rigor, and he never had to do that with me. Once I started working with him, you can't make any mistakes with him, and it's not because he's a bad guy. It's because it's just required. So that's one of the offshoot incredible opportunities that came my way from starting at Club Med, you know.
All right. You put a rig in his backyard. You then meet Chris Angel's girlfriend. So take me from here.
When you say the rig that I had in my backyard,
Oh,
is
it
that
was
what you're
your.
talking about?
Oh,
Yeah, yeah,
oh, oh! I thought
yeah.
it. I thought this was in Chris Angel's backyard.
So what you would have heard this conversation 1,000 times, in the 80s and 90s of people like, people who went through a circus program. It was the most famous conversation you ever heard. It was called, I'm gonna go get a rig and I'm gonna go set it up, and they all want to recreate what Club Med did. Not so easy. First of all, you gotta Bob Christians built all the rigs, so we didn't really know how to build one, where to get the materials and stuff like that. And so I pioneered all that on my own when I left Club Med. I bought a house that had the right size property. It was actually a little small, but I made it work. And I got most of my gear from the scraps that were being thrown away from the installation of the effects show at MGM Grand. At that time, there was only one Cirque du Soleil show in Las Vegas called Mystere. So I built that rig in my backyard. I actually did it. And also the biggest challenge that people had trying to do flying trapeze programs was finding the right insurance. And I don't know if I can take full credit for cracking that code, but one of the riggers that I worked with was doing ropes courses, and he convinced the ropes course company to cover the flying trapeze, and he did. And once that happened, everyone started using that company because that was the biggest challenge we had of starting a flying trapeze program outside of Club Med, because Club Med had the huge insurance umbrella policy, was getting insurance, and of course, since then, people have found other ways. But there was a good 10-year run, maybe 20-year run, where they were using the company that my friend talked into doing that. So anyway, so that's the rig in my side yard in Vegas for 3 years. I had it there before I sold the house. Had a lot of fun there. A lot of famous people came there. Sam Keen, who was like like the Mark Twain of our times, fell in love with the flying trapeze in his 60s, and we built his rig that he has up in Sonora, not Sonora, where that wine country is up in Northern California. He had a house and we set his rig up there. So it just the offshoots of opportunities and the people that I met from my Club Med foundational experience is just so uncanny. I mean, it's wonderfully magical.
Okay, I'm sorry to beat this to death, but I need
Go
you to
ahead.
tell me about the girlfriend, okay? Because this goes back to the summer camp story. This is the one I want to get to because
Okay, so it's not, she wasn't a girlfriend, but she was in the Chris Angel show there were four clowns. I was friends with all of them, but there was one who was married to a woman who was an elite, very high level aerialist in another Cirque competitor show here in town at the Wynn called Le Rev, which to me was one of the greatest shows this town has ever seen. So what happened was is that her husband, my friend, wanted to get her a freestand, not a freestanding, but a single upright so that she could train in her backyard. And it was actually an upright that I was originally one of the aunts of the Farfans that I flew with. And so we set it up in one yard with one of the performers in our show. And then she moved and it came down and then went up in another yard and it came down. And then finally my friend bought it for his wife as a birthday gift. So somehow I always ended up on putting that rig up or taking it down. I don't know how it happened. Some sort of karmic attachment to that rig. So we set it up in her yard, and I get to witness her coming home and seeing her birthday gift, and it was like so amazing. And I started talking to her, and I'm like, "So, where did you get your start in aerial?" Because back in the day, before Club Med or programs like Club Med, which weren't many, you were either born into it or you ran away and joined it. You know, you were either from a circus family or you maybe in the Eastern Bloc countries, you segued from gymnastics or whatever into it because it was a nationally, treasured activity. But this girl, with the advent of the summer camps that were offshoots of the Club Med program, she said to me when I asked her, "Where did you get your start?" And she said, "Oh, I mean, you probably wouldn't know, but," and I said, "Well, try me." And she says it was a summer camp. I said, "Which one?" And she said, White Mountain. I said, "What year?" And her mouth dropped and she looked at me and she said, "Louis." She was 8 years old. She didn't have a part in the show, and she was like, I could see her kind of slumped over, her body language. She was like practically crying, and like we hung a pulley at the top of the field house that we had the show in. And I said, "Okay, here's what you're gonna do. You're gonna put this belt, this harness on, and you're gonna have your hand in this hand loop actually, and you're gonna do this hula hoop, and you're gonna start the show." And she told me, and to me, I was just trying to find a part for a kid in the show, and of course I knew what it would mean to her, but she told me that that one experience sent her off in a direction that had her every year just stepping up her game, and she fell in love with it and she took it to the limit and ran with it and became a premier, Cirque du Soleil caliber aerialist. The rest is history on that. And by the way, there was another girl at that camp the same year who actually I knew from Club Med the year before who came to the camp because she knew I was teaching there. And she went off to San Francisco and started a whole circus school because of that one experience.
oh man, those are great stories. I
Yeah,
love.
yeah,
Thank you for telling that because
yeah. Big,
that one
big.
gets me. Even though I'm hardened, cynic right now, I still love hearing that story. So thank you.
The greatest gift and also the greatest responsibility as a circus chief is making that call when to take someone out of safety lines, especially if they weren't on the circus team. There was so much stigma and import and really imprinted upon us from Bob that you know once those lines come off, you can't save them anymore. So you better know that they're ready, and that's why you have them fall to the net with safety lines on 1,000 times, and then slowly and more often you back off on the lines until they can do it. But then when the lines come off, psychologically something else could happen. But the greatest, I guess, achievement for some of these people that were in circus villages that were working other departments who were circus enthusiasts who would always fly in the show, but they always flew in safety lines. Happened when I went to go to Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. So there was a girl named Natalie, and she was in charge of the archery department. And and Jerry Coughlin was the chief of the village at the time. And
Well,
she was,
excuse me one
yeah,
sec. Can I
you
just
go ahead.
interject? Yeah,
Yeah.
just so our listeners. So you would often go to do like rigging inspections, right? Like at Xtapa charting. So you were in Club Med charting, right? When you say Malaysia.
Yes, good point. Good point. So what
Okay.
happened was Patrick Hayes left the tennis department and started opening up the circus villages in the Asian zone. Starting, they did Sapporo, they did Bali, Indonesia, they did and
And
Kuala
yeah,
Lumpur.
Lindeman Island, where I met Patrick later in
There you
2000.
go.
Yeah.
So once I had left Club Med and went professional, I still kept a good relationship with Bob Christians, and long after my professional career, he would call me and have me go to, and he called other people like Bobby Bates and Peter to go to his, elite team, if you want to call it that, that he could trust to go and inspect rigging so he didn't have to go anymore. And so we would do that. And I did this one. It was also the grand opening of the circus village in Malaysia. So it was a combination inspection, and more importantly, though, it was to really bring in some professionals to make their circus show that week extra special because it was a grand opening. So Natalie, we're passing. I talked to Jerry. I said, Jerry, Natalie, he goes, I know, she's ready. Things were getting a little looser during those years where, if it was really the chief's call, we didn't have to call Bob and ask permission anymore. So we're sitting in, and the ritual was the people are sitting on the bench, we're passing out the belts. And the first thing that confused Natalie was why she was wearing the same costume as the G.O. Flyers that were going to do the demonstration afterwards without the safety line. So, but she didn't, she may have thought, oh, they ran out of costumes, so they just gave me this one. So we're passing out the belts. I'm passing out the belts, and I'm passing it to the guests and the guests. And then I get to her and I skip her. And then I go to the next person and give the belts out. And she's like, you forgot something. I said, no, I didn't. She goes, no, you forgot to give me a belt. I said, what for? She goes, because I'm flying. I said, you're flying with us tonight. And the look on her face when she realized that she was going to be flying in the show out of lines, no return. She was just going to do the trick across. We weren't going to risk the return. And she would just, and I have this on video, and you could see like this was such it's almost, it would be equivalent of a B league baseball player being called up to the show. You made the big team. And when she flew in the show and her dance in the net and everything afterwards was just, it was so beautiful to be able to give someone that gift. But along with that gift comes tremendous responsibility. But to be able to make that call to say, you know what, you can do it, you're good enough. And I've had to do that as a chief. And there's been people who have been chief many more years than me. They know what I'm talking about. And they know the responsibility that comes along with it, and the magic that happens when they're actually able to do it. It's one of those beautiful gifts that we get to give as a chief of circus program.
Nice. Can we take a moment to do some shout outs?
Yeah, yeah, sure. And I'm going to say right now, I can't remember everyone, but almost everyone on this list, in fact, everyone on this list, are people that I kept relationships with after Club Med. So, of course, first and foremost, Peter Gold. And then right after that is Bobby Bates. He and I have done so much after Club Med. And it's so funny because we had a tough start, but man, we became best friends very, very, very shortly after that. Patrick Hayes, David Asher, Tara Nice. She was just in Sandpiper for 6 of those months, and she's so incredible. Her brother was the niece that was on what was that famous MTV videos? He was one of the video
Like a
hosts
like a
there.
VJ, a VJ, you mean on
Yeah, yeah,
MTV?
he's one of Robert Neese. I forget what his first name was. John Shelley, who Peter just told me. I did not know that he had passed, but so John Shelley for helping me get around to the other clubs. Jerry Coughlin, otherwise known as Jerry the Clown. Of course, Bob Christians himself, the love of my life, Angie Corelli, and another love of my life, Stephanie Costello.
Uh-oh.
And these are just two women that have made huge impacts. And we're to this day, we still keep in touch. And Stephanie lives in Vegas and Angie's up in Washington. And then that's pretty much it for now.
Okay.
For the people that I have the best memories with. And of course, there's tons others. If I forgot your name and you're listening to this, please don't feel insulted or left out. It's just, I just turned 61, so some of the brain cells might be need a little recharge.
We all need a recharging every now and then, for sure. You mentioned Jerry the Clown. Did you have a nickname in Club Med, Louis?
Well, I mean, it was, of course, everyone in Club Med, when you were G.O, no one really knew your last name. You were like Sally Sailing or, Patrick Tennis. I was Louis Circus, but because I was from New York, they knew me as Louis Soykus, Soykus. So, because I have no matter where I go and however many languages I learned or wherever I've lived around the world, the New York can't take it out of me, the accent. So, Louis from the Soykus.
If we could go back to Sandpiper just for one story because I skipped over it when I shouldn't have. Can you give me the lions and tiger story, please?
When you're getting a group of kids and you got 4 days to put on a 15-act show, and you're only getting the 4 and 5-year-olds for an hour, the 6 and 7-year-olds for an hour, the 8 to 12-year-olds for an hour, and then the specialty acts for an hour, you got to make it engaging. And they don't have a super long attention span. So I saw the first couple of times that I tried to teach lions and tigers, it was very generic and very like unengaging. So I had to come up with this way to teach it. And there was this whole story about the ringmaster sleeping on the ground, and he had a hula hoop in his hand, and every time he snored, the hoop would go up, and the kids club GOs would have them, hey, let's go through the hoop. And so I would, on every snore, the hoop would go up and they would start going through it. So I was actually training them. I learned a way to train them before I even started training them. I developed this whole routine, and even getting them to roar. I would tell them this sad story that the train somewhere in Georgia around midnight, for the grown-ups to laugh at that were there watching, broke down, and we're going to be able to do the circus show. And so I would do this animated crying stuff, and like, we have no lions and tigers for the show. And every time without fail, there would always be a kid that raised their hand and would go, well, maybe we could be the lions and tigers. And I'd be like, what? That no way. And then I'd be like, you guys can't even roar like lions and tigers. And then so I had this whole shtick that I did, and it was like the chief came over to watch. They were like, it was the kids had the greatest time. And of course, when we did the show, it was just that much better. And so years later, I come back, and I think 10 years later, I had to come back to Sandpiper for something. And, I kind of had a reputation that was still alive in the club. And the guy's like, hey, I don't know if he was chief or he was just one of the guys on the team. He's like, let me show you something. And I'm like, sure. And he showed me how he taught the kids lions and tigers. And I'm talking, the telephone game where you tell one thing and then by the end of the line it's something completely different.
Yeah.
Well, it had stayed exactly the same, exactly how I invented it. And he was pawning it off like, let me show you what I came up with to teach the lions and tigers. And I watched him and I just sat back, all mixed feelings. First of all, laughing inside that this guy was like clowning me, trying to tell me that he came up with it, what it was my invention. But at the other time, the deeper part of me, because I had matured since then, a little more spiritual, I was like, wow, something that I came up with, like the necessity being the mother of all invention. I needed something, I came up with it, and it stuck. And to know that that had lived on and became the standard, at least in that village. I don't know if every club met, was teaching it that way. Stuck. It was another acknowledgement of like, when I put my mind to something and come up with it, it's a keeper. But it was just him trying to pawn it off like it was his invention. And I never called him out on it. I just let him have his moment.
Very
But it
big
was
of you.
funny. Yeah, yeah. Well, I didn't. Why? Like, why?
Yeah.
He's let him have it. Who can someone confident within themselves, which I learned from Club Med. You don't need to do that stuff. You could just sit back and let them have it because you don't need it anymore. You pass the baton.
Is there anything you miss about Club Med, Louis?
Well, there's a poem, and the poem goes like this. It goes, at first people see the stars, then they want to be a star, then they become a star. Ah, but the fourth line of the poem, to become a stage for other people's to become stars. And that's where I got most of my satisfaction towards, the later part of my years. Club Med was the place where I got to be a star, but and as ego fulfilling as it was, to catch, arguably the heaviest person in the world, 300 pounds, and to put him back on the bar. I don't know if anyone's beaten that record. We even submitted it to Guinness. They acknowledged it, but they said the section was too small to include it. I have that on video too. But I guess for the ego part of me, it was such a high and it was so good. But if I were to go back and do it, I would say I would milk it for the stage, for the fourth line of the poem, to really be more conscious of what's going on, and to be able to go back in that environment, to be able to perform and instruct and produce, not from ego, but from knowing the difference that it's making in people's lives. So I don't know if that really didn't answer your question. Like, I missed the camaraderie. I missed the ability to step in at the last second when there was a crisis, and just to pull something out of thin air, to the show must go on. That happened about three or four times at the in the club, where there was something that needed to happen because they needed to buy time, or someone got injured last second, and to be able to step in and do that, it was very fulfilling. Obviously, the accolades and people coming up to you afterwards and just saying that was incredible. Well, my kids will never be the same. So I do miss that. I miss the youth. I miss the flexibility, the strength that I had in my body. But I have moved on and transitioned to these later stages of my life, I think fairly maturely, very seamlessly, and no regrets. And I'm super happy with what Club Med gave me, the experiences I have there, and where I'm at in my life right now. And so much of it I attribute to those couple of years at Club Med.
Being an English lit major, I'm racking my brain. Who wrote that poem?
I don't know. It
Okay,
was just it
it's a
was
nice
something
poem.
it was a mentor that was trying to help me transition out of being driven to real the real the real goodies are when you can facilitate someone else to reach that. And that was way more fulfilling. The experiences that I had as a facilitator, especially later on when Peter and I started sharing and presenting the circus arts and specifically the flying trapeze in a structured personal development program, was greater than any personal achievement that I had done, as a star.
Understood. That's a very good mentor too that imparted that to you.
Yes, yes. If I could have one more minute to tell you the,
Sure.
the single greatest, if there was ever the circus, the Trapeze Chronicles by Louis Schneidman, this story would take the cake. And it happened at the Omega Institute, which is arguably one of the largest spiritual study retreats on the planet, upstate New York. And so Sam Keen originally did it, and then Peter ran with it for 20 years. We would offer the flying trapeze up there for personal transformation. And there was a woman up there who was struggling with her swing. And the swing is an intermediate part where you're having to learn the swing so you could do the bigger level tricks. And she was stuck. And so I came up there. I had someone take over the safety lines. I climbed up the ladder and I said, okay, move over. And she's like, what? I said, I'm going to swing with you. She goes, what? Like, she had no idea that that could even happen. So was right next to her, and she was in the safety lines. I was not. and we started swinging, and I was calling it out as we were swinging. She was matching me. She was doing great. And I said, okay, that's so you can get it into your being, into your muscle memory. I came down, she came down crying hysterically. And I'm like, what, whoa, what are you crying for? You did great up there. You got it. You figured it out. And she goes, no, no, no. You don't understand. Because she was in her mid 40s, and she said, and she had, I did not know that she had relationship issues her entire life. She was just constantly having difficult relationships with men. She goes, you don't understand. She said, that was the first time in my life that any man has ever stood by my side. And even as tears come to my eyes right now, I was like, it was just to know that those kind of things happen on the flying trapeze is just, I'm so grateful that Peter called me that one day.
Well, this is what I was gonna ask you, like how to it's tricky how to end this interview because of if you think about all the circumstances that led you there, and it all started, yes, with Peter Gold calling you, hey Louis, would you like to come down and join me? Probably not thinking of the life-changing moments you would have, right?
For myself and for the people that I would eventually be able to work with and the kids. Oh boy.
Good man, that Peter.
Oh yeah. Still is.
Yeah. Thanks again, Peter. You weren't lying about Louis. By the way, he is as delivered, if not much more. So thanks again, Peter Gold.
And thank you for doing this because
Oh no,
this is good. I mean, this is good for people to hear. It's a fairly inexpensive graduate school if you can stick with it.
that's right.
But it changed my life.
So glad
I
to
got
hear
lots of
that.
pictures too.
I urge everyone after this interview or before to go to the My First Season Facebook page and check out the amazing photos that Louis sent me, and we're going to share with you all. So yes, just head on over to the My First Season Facebook page to check out all his amazing photos from an amazing time in Club Med. I wish I was a GO in the '80s. I always say, that was a great time because every ex-GO I interview from that time period has the greatest stories. And thank you for now being part of the My First Season family and sharing yours, Louis.
You're welcome. It was the years when the seatbelt wasn't required.
That's right. No safes in the rooms, no locks on the doors. Simpler times.
Yeah. Where everyone's stripped of their status, whatever they were in society, when you stick them in a fantasy island environment where they can't leave and they gotta sit at the table with seven other people and no one knows who or what you are. It humbles you and it levels the playing field and it's whoever came up with the formula. And especially, they are the inventors of the all-inclusive vacation concept. It was just a win all across the board, whoever came up with this concept.
Yeah, Belgian water polo player named Gerard Blitz. Yeah, opened the first one in 1950. So yeah, that was his idea. So thank you so much again,
You got it.
Louis, for
Thanks for
sharing your story with us.
it allows me to access all those memories and I'll be thinking about it for the rest of the day.
Oh, thank you so much again. Well, everyone, seasoners, that was the one and only Louis Schneidman. Thank you again, and we'll see you all next week. Say bye to everyone, Louis.
How do we say it? Hands up.
Hands
All
up.
right.
Hands up, baby.
Take care, everybody. Continue to have a wonderful life.